start to record. Nice. Then first, welcome. Happy day, everybody, to Breakout Room and Deep Funding Town Hall on today is May 18th. And it's something like 1900 UTC. Nice. So in this room today, it's about comparing Catalyst to Deep Funding, which is actually quite interesting because when we look on it, we have the DLT, we have more and more DLT ecosystems at general building up. And usually they are built by founding entities, which usually also includes there's a certain token minting process where a certain allocation goes into a treasury. And then all the founding entities have a problem actually, because then they have the treasury, they want to use the treasury, usually to build up the ecosystem. Though now you really have to find a struggle to define, okay, how is the access defined in between the community who is executing on the treasury's behalf in order to build up the ecosystem. And let's say first drafts on, let's say, I think what we know today as, let's say, DLT-based innovation funds came by, I think, Bitcoin improvement proposals a little bit. Actually, a community was able to submit proposals to a protocol. And then a lot of evolution happened and whatnot. And then in 2021, not 2020 actually, late 2020, Project Catalyst started at Cardano blockchain with a really interesting approach of developing an innovation fund, which itself does not only build accessibility between community and treasury, but also engineers governance. Because usually when it comes to really moving into a more decentralized ecosystem where the community is able to take decisions, to manage budgets and whatnot, there's always a problem of transition of power. And in order to overcome this, let's say, massive challenges of transition of power, where founding entity does not become the, let's say, custodian and key holder of the ecosystem or the funding systems in this regard, where it's more the community who is executing on this. And then we always have these problems of, okay, which governance protocols are actually able to handle such a transition of power towards the community. And this is actually then two main parts I would see in a little bit this kind of innovation funds, that on one side, it's about building accessibility between self-appointed community and the fund. And while executing also being an engine room for governance systems, processes, functions actually. And SingularityNET, which is pretty close to Cardano by default. They spent off last year, in beginning of last year, Project Deep Funding, which actually works very similar to what Project Catalyst does, right? You have the Singularity Foundation, you have a treasury, you have Project Deep Funding where proposals can come, submit proposals in order to execute on the see you then, Vanessa. Oh my god, this is, I think, the worst intro I've done. Oh fuck, I lose a little bit of my track. Sorry for this. I'm not used anymore in these meetings. But yeah, so we have this several generations now what we see of innovation funds coming up. CK Ignite in Mina protocol, for example, is again evolution of this. And what I think is really remarkable in Catalyst, one of the biggest achievements has been to build really a group of experts, to cultivate experts within the community until the point where you can definitely consider community members as professionals when it comes about this innovation fund. Let's say Project Catalyst, for example. A bunch of you people I've seen the last years, like just forever. I have a little bit of assumption. And I know that in a lot of individuals, there's so much knowledge, experience, and expertise about the systems, how they actually run by being a participant, that there's very specific knowledge emerging actually right now. And I think this knowledge, we don't look on it very agnostic yet. We are still very focused, like the Catalyst people are mostly very about Catalyst, Deep Funding people, well, which are kind of influenced a lot by Catalyst, but however, they are looking more in their box. And for example, most here, I know since a while from Project Catalyst as well. And what this session aims, hopefully, to start a little bit is to say, while we are building up experience and expertise in a specific ecosystem, how can we make sure that with this building of knowledge, we also have a knowledge network where we are able to share our achievements and failures to other ecosystems to make sure, cool, they don't have to do the same mistakes we did. For example, with a lot of stuff in the PA and VPA process and Catalyst, for example. To say, okay, we made a lot of mistakes already, discovered a lot of stuff. Then being able, for example, as a community as a whole, to say, hey, deep funding community, you also start conversations about how to audit proposals, how to assess them, how to review them. And by this, starting to build really from individual level, we as individuals, connections between ecosystems to make sure we don't have to repeat mistakes and we don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. Not always creating new stuff, but making sure the stuff which is already created is connected in one way or another. And therefore, main point also today then is simply looking on Project Catalyst and Deep Funding and say, when we start to compare them, how do they look like? What is same? What is different? Starting a little bit to build a cross-innovation fund knowledge here with the community. Yes, any thoughts on this so far? And sorry, I lost a little bit track in the intro. Excuse me for this. Platforms. Vanessa writes the platforms. Okay. Then let's say, I start to spin up the user Miro board. Share screen. And sharing to this one as well. Because my main goal would really be listen about you, mostly because here a lot of Catalyst OGs already around. And some, no, not really, a lot of people from Deep Funding yet. But some, Curtis, for example, you know quite well about the process there too. So Vanessa mentioned already the platforms. So already, yeah. And Tommy stresses out in comments as well, the platforms are going to be important. Idea scale definitely was not ideal. And message from Vanessa before was the platforms. Sway with some hearts around it. Idea scale, not so much. Yeah, quite agree on this. On Catalyst, the platform to submit proposals is Idea scale. Well known as Idea fail as well. But yeah, so that's another part. On SingularityNET, it's Sway. When looking on Idea scale and Sway, what is a mess at Idea scale? What is an advantage on Sway? Yeah, because yeah, Vanessa, I think you have been around Sway and Deep Funding for a while. I think you know it.
I mean, I don't feel like I know Sway as well as I do Idea Scale, but I think we all know that it just wasn't quite, Idea Scale just doesn't quite do what people need it to. Search functions particularly are horrible in my experience. Um, but yeah, also it's proprietary and it probably costs them a fortune. And I think Sway was built within SingularityNet, was it not?
Sway is a own provider as well. It's a little bit like Idea scale, just much
Yeah,
smaller.
okay. No, I didn't know
But
that. Okay. I'm disappointed now.
I think the difference is Idea scale is a pretty large platform and doesn't make a lot of, let's say, custom
Mhm.
applications to their platform. Sway, I think they are much more on the trip as well, where they are much more, let's say, collaborative to really specific demands from their
But,
clients.
but also with Sway, it seems like I mean, maybe not as much as people would like, but people do use it and they comment. And in Idea Scale, you did get some comments on a proposal, but they were mostly, I don't know how to describe it really, but sometimes it would just be some random person saying something that didn't really make any sense. And you'd just be like,
Hmm.
okay. You know, I think maybe it's because SingularityNet is a bit of a smaller community. I don't know. But that's another thing actually, is the size of the community.
Hmm. What, even if this will be a hard one, what is a good thing on idea scale? Because I simply use blue stickies for good things, red stickies for bad things. I mean, come on, guys, be lovely with idea scale at least one time. It owes us a bit. We owe him a bit. A little bit.
I mean, if it's a desired attribute, idea scale does offer anonymity.
Mm, hmm. But IoT still has your email, IP, and stuff, right?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the community's talking points is that it is somewhat centralized in the sense that because it is anonymous, but not anonymous to the central authority.
Hmm. True. What would be another good point about idea scale?
Yeah, Kevin mentioned idea scale, let me see, well-structured fields for building proposals. I think I agree with that too. Maybe it's just how the proposals and Catalyst are done compared to Sway.
That's true. Because on Sway, it really sucks to write a proposal. Oh my fucking God. If you don't do just one massive copy paste, you will stack hours on.
Yes, please write that down, Felix, that you cannot edit your proposal. It's just pointless.
Okay, you see, at least we find some good points about ideas. Okay, that's cool, actually. Nice. Okay.
Yeah, just maybe the same as the how the proposal writing kind of sucks is yeah, idea scale the website just seems to load faster and function a lot better than Sway at this point, at least in my experience.
So I do agree, and what I think is happening is IdeaScale has no AI, whereas Sway is doing pre-processing of the data through AI, and that process it's waiting. So the page is waiting to load once the or before the AI is complete. So I wonder if that's like a static website issue in the way that the data is actually being presented and the data structure is being handled because it seems like every single action on a page triggers the AI workflow, and that workflow can take 15, 20 seconds. So you're waiting for 15, 20 seconds between every change.
Hmm. Just copy pasting comments.
As a proposer, the proposer in idea scale, you can store tons of information when you are writing your proposal. I know this platform has the ability to receive huge amounts of information in text, in some, mainly in text. And that's good for a proposer, I guess, because when you want to tell a story about about your project or your idea, you need a space. So you as a proposer, you can choose. You can choose if you want to tell a short story or a long story. But that is definitely is inconvenient when you are a PA or BPA, for example, because that amount of information makes difficult how analyze key points on a proposal. I don't know. I think Sway also have the same characteristic of not in some way not condense kind of key points, offer some kind of features to extract some key points. I don't know. That's a situation in both idea scale and Sway. But I don't know if in this current AI era we can start to develop some kind of tools that permit to extract key points. I don't know if maybe in text that would be fine, but maybe in graphics and in many other visual ways. Maybe in this, with all of this AI noise, we can start to think about how to facilitate the work of the PAs and BPAs in Catalyst. In Singularity, I think the same is necessary. The same thing is necessary.
Much agree. I wrap this up a little bit of how to build access from proposal platform to AI enhancements and integrations, maybe.
So maybe the creators of these platforms can start to think about how to take this information, this raw information, and pass it to some other kind of analysis, I think.
I think there, for example, one thing, what I remember in Catalyst, it was always about API access to community, for example, right? I think this is a really crucial thing, like where we see already a proposal platform and decentralized ecosystem. There is not one major platform, ideally, right? There can be how many platforms. You just have to make sure that they have the data structure to organize on. And if your proposal platform does not provide simply as API access, community is handicapped a lot. For example, just Darlington, for example, with Light Donation, just how much he struggles to get to the information that he can build up his platform, which I think is so far really one of the most matured platforms, actually, when looking on Catalyst. I think this is really important, right? Vanessa, do you have the answer?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that when you mentioned Darlington and integration and all that. It is a real double bind because I think somebody mentioned before that there's the potential for privacy on idea scale, but it scuppers a lot of projects who have been wanting to work with project data and build, some kind of audit platform or whatever, because, legally the data that's in there is protected, so they can't have it. And I'm really in two minds about how I feel about that, because on the whole, I would generally defend data privacy. But I just think maybe there needs to be more transparency. It sounds ironic, but more transparency about what data is private on idea scale, so that people don't propose projects that depend on accessing data that they can't have. And I think that might need to be something that Sway thinks about, because, there's got to be some kind of data privacy issue with any platform like that.
Fair point. Then, besides platform, because I think we could still be hour or more just on this topic. But when looking on innovation funds at channel, let's say, okay, definitely agree. Platform makes a really important part there. What else would be interesting to compare Deep Funding and Catalyst to?
I don't know if this is the appropriate place, but it is a hot topic in Catalyst, is the voting anonymity and what Vanessa was talking about with data privacy in relation to that. What is considered private? Because I believe my understanding with Sway is all that information is public, but it excludes the wallet address. So we can't tie it to an identity of any form. Yet who voted, not who, but how the members were voted, what they voted on, some of that is actually public information, right?
That's true. Actually, I think idea scale actually, well, it's very often mentioned, it's on Yarmungandra, it's on a private sidechain. We can't do anything. We don't have any data about the PAs and whatnot, and referrers and voters in general. So there's not a lot of transparency, though it can protect a lot of privacy. In Sway, actually, therefore, we would need somebody from the SingularityNET Foundation here actually to really give good answers on this, because I'm not really comfortable of giving answers to your question, Curtis. Not fully sure how the voting on deep funding is actually handled on transparency side. Because it's linked to your deep funding account. When you go on deep funding, normally you can set up your account, set up email with your email address simply, I think, and you can directly add a wallet there. So pretty much the same like on IdeaScale as well.
That's kind of what I got out of it too, is it's the same process. That information is funneled to Yan, and then Yan is manipulating it and adding privacy on top of it, then relaying that information, which has the same concerns of centralization to a degree.
No, I think, yeah. General right, the whole voting control in the hands of founding entity.
Kevin's asking a very good point in chat about doxing the projects or the proposers. Are they required to dox for Deep Fund?
Don't think so that I have to. No. Energy receiving deep funding. No. Actually, in deep funding, it's quite difficult. For example, in Catalyst, as a funded proposer, you just have to provide a proof of life meeting where you have to attend. You need to provide a wallet address, and then once you're approved, you went through the proof of life where you have to do some minimal stuff. Then you receive your funds. There's no contract or whatever at all. Between funded proposers and Deep Fund and SingularityNET Foundation, there's a contract actually. Once you are approved, the SingularityNET Foundation sets up a contract between funding and you actually. And and you have to sign it online. And you have to provide an entity name, can be an individual or whatever, but I'm not sure, for example, if you can say, I'm hospital, for example, or I'm whatnot. I think you have to use a legal name in some way. Actually, I'm not sure if, actually on this one, what do you think? Is no contract like in idea on Catalyst? Or contract like in deep funding better? I mean, better is hard to say. It's
one thing that we've been looking at as a platform on our platform is when funds are received, that there's a process in place or a framework in place for the community itself. So if it's a DAO that's receiving the funds, that the wallet that's receiving it is either a multi-sig or a contract address instead of just a typical DeFi wallet that, you know, can manipulate the money and the funds in it, sort of protecting the community that's supporting it. I don't know if that's desired here.
I mean, for example, the milestone-based funding.
I'm sorry, say that again, Felix.
Well, just can you ask your question again? Sorry.
Well, just that so instead of allowing single user wallets to receive the funding, if this is, say, a DAO or a community that's proposing this work, that there's a structure or a framework in place so that it's mandating a multi-sig wallet or a smart contract, and then the funds get in through there.
I think that's a long-term goal. I think for both of them have a little bit Catalyst and Deep Funding to have this idea of milestones, right? And milestones are bound, for example, to smart contracts, then where you can automate payments and whatnot, and decentralized approach. But I think this is something what both are definitely lacking, right? Really the technological implementation actually of a lot of, let's say, blockchain utility actually. Else than just moving funds and voting.
One thing that occurs to me that might be a difference, but I don't know enough about SingularityNET yet. Does it have the same voting issues that Catalyst has in the sense of the dominance of a plutocratic voting system?
Definitely is.
Wow.
At this stage, yeah, because most of the voting is still done in a plutocratic manner. So same like on Cardano and Catalyst. Though what is interesting, SingularityNET experiments much more with different approaches. For example, in the first governance round, which took place between Deep Funding round 2 and 1 and 2, they experimented with 3 kinds of voting, that you had the plutocratic, but also quadratic, and a meritocratic approach as well. Meritocratic right now is only built by the interactions of participants on Sway. Where simply say, oh, okay, how many points do you get when you add a comment or you submit a proposal or whatnot, and to translate this weight into your wallet and actually with which you want. But still very plutocratic dominated here. And looking on other parts in governance as well, like also, I think what looks also looking on the chat just between Curtis and Kevin on the doxing system and Vanessa too. I think, for example, then the question, right, if you said, okay, even if you would have internally doxing, for example, who would be responsible for validating whatever. And then the problem comes a little bit like, which roles do your ecosystem actually have? What I think was really remarkable to see in Catalyst, I think the roles have been really very valid there. I mean, most of you here have been in minimum 1 or 2 roles there as well. PA, VPA, challenge team, referrer, voter proposer, funded proposer, circle, whatnot. Deep funding doesn't came up yet with any real roles, actually. Because when it comes to decentralized administration, let's say, for example, it's the community, somehow you still need, at some point, administration, even if the more stuff is automated, let's say, in the best case. Like, how do you define these bodies built by the community who actually can take administrative actions of the larger ecosystem? What do you think? How important are roles to a decentralized ecosystem? Roles or, let's say, professional groups?
Last night, we had a discussion a little bit about this in context of Cardano's MBO. We're implementing a version of that and how decisions can be made. So if there is designated roles and then somebody has administrative powers, granted to that particular role, there could be a process where they make proposals that go to other role members, and you try to achieve consensus within that committee or that small, pod of people. And so there's some checks and balances before they can just go and take action. They have to make a proposal and go through certain checks and balances. Once it's approved, and a small set of people, because you don't want this to be like a 2-month long, right, deliberation, just something that can be quickly agreed on, and then action can be taken. And if that process was not fulfilled, then the person who had the administrative privileges has consequences, has to deal with taking action without achieving consensus first.
The general definitely good point to have neither on MBO and the roles there. It's true, because it's a pretty serious outline anyway, how roles would really drive, let's say, a government system in this regard. Hmm. Hmm. And looking on this, for example, comparing to, because there are some roles after all. When looking, for example, on SingularityNET and Deep Fund, there's not directly that much roles in deep funding built up yet. I think the only really official role is, I would say, a proposer, funded proposer, or maybe contributor by giving comments on proposals, for example. But yeah, not like PAs, VPAs, challenge teams, circle, referrals, whatnot, all this stuff. Though, when you compare, for example, Curtis, when you said the Cardano MBO, then when we look on SingularityNet, there's the movement to this income DAO, where we have also some sort of a close outline, because it's also a, let's say, trial-based governance system where you would have 3 main bodies, which is the ambassadors program, deep funding, and the supervisory council, which then together build an execution team. And this execution team then actually a little bit the same like the constitutional committee, DREPs, and the SBOs in Cardano in the MBO system then actually. Not in the MBO, but in the CIP 694, well, which is part of the MBO.
I definitely like that in the way I see those committees, right? The Treasury Committee, all the other committees inside of SingularityNet, they're sort of playing the role. It's just a group of people fulfilling that particular role. So if everybody in that group can arrive at consensus before action is taken, if that's a desired outcome.
I'm not sure how, because in Cardano there's already straightforward solution, and how actually let's say, Constitution Committee, SPOs, and DREPs would actually vote on chain. In Singularity and with the sync content, I'm not sure if there's already such a refined process on how to act governance decisions then actually. I think that's much more on the early, yeah, definitely on the earlier stage in Cardano. So also one interesting point is, for example, when we look on DREPs and SPOs, Constitutional Committee in Cardano, for example, most of the people, they're actually community members after all, right? I mean, most of the DREPs, I would assume they are community members, and most of the SPOs also would be community members. In Syncom, though, execution team, for example, representatives of Ambassador's program and Deep Funding would be SingularityNET Foundation members. So this difference actually. So actually, the main setting of approaching decentralization differs through initial groups, which are set up by two ecosystems. But moving back to comparing Catalyst and Deep Fund. On the governance topics, and still, like, what did we have? Catalyst has no contracts, Deep Fund has contracts, but it's mostly dominated plutocratic still. And then we ended with the roles, exactly. So Catalyst has a shitload of roles. I think they have been really, really successful, actually. When we looked at the amount of participants, and after all, it's still equality, this was insane at some point. I mean, it started to change in Fund 7 when we had shitload of bots coming in and a lot of stuff went funny. And PA program has proven game theory still is a theory based. So this doesn't really hold water. So I think this has been actually, I disagree when I say the PA and VPA process has been a beautiful failure in Catalyst. People just listening. Okay, then I try to entertain. No, not entertain. Getting some insights. Mm. Like, would you recommend to deep funds to implement, let's say, for example, the PAs or VPAs as we know from Catalyst in one or another way?
I mean, I think that there could be room for facilitation and assisting the proposals, maybe designated people to help. I mean, if they are, because what is the PAs, right? They're assessing the proposals for qualification, make sure they're fulfilling the community's needs. Does Deep Fund not have that? I know you and Jan kind of acted as those roles during the last one, but is there not like a designated position to help facilitate the proposers?
Not yet. There are the
You
folks from
guys,
SingularityNet Foundation. So, for example, last rounds was a lot Jan and Pete were there. Now we have Rafael, who joined the team as well. I think this part of their job to manage the community there, though there's not a dedicated role for the community yet to support the proposals.
May I, Felix, just a
Sure,
small input? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, what we did last round of the deep funding was the peer review from teams that earned the award in the previous round. So this type of interaction we want to expand, and having these peer reviews from the community as well through tasks and increasing and scaling the overall process to facilitate proposers and proposals to thrive. That's the idea and the goal.
Curtis, go for it.
Yeah, I thought the peer review in the last round was great, and I got very good feedback on our proposal. But I did see a common, there was a lot of common questions that were coming up with details that the peers didn't know, right? So for instance, how does the 10 and 15% distribution affect our project? How do I work in the 10% allocation of AGIX token into my proposal? And the peers didn't have those answers. So I think there's room for a facilitator who has that inside knowledge to assist and help some of the facilitators that they can't get out of a peer review.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's hard to charge the peers having all the knowledge around the overall process in deep funding. So it's important having two options here: education, which is something that we can work as well in order for these peers have more information around it, or more people from inside participating in the process to solve these questions, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, thank you for your feedback, Curtis, in this sense.
Actually, also one thing what came a lot to mind, because Curtis, when you said, oh, okay, the review is actually assessing the proposal process, right? I think this major difference what we had in Catalyst, when on the beginning the PAs have been the CAs, right? Community advisors, where it was not really clear. What do they actually do? They assess proposals, but do they help the proposer, or do they help the voter, or do they help who actually? And then it had to shift towards from community advisor to proposal assessor. But I personally think it's a little sad, because we saw the highest value from feedback actually is to proposals themselves, while they submit their proposal and create their proposal, right? But yeah, really good point there, Curtis. Vanessa.
You are muted, Vanessa.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there might be actually two roles being rolled into one here. There's a kind of mentorship thing about supporting a particular proposer that you know something about what they're doing, and you can help them with their proposal. And then there's a completely other thing about supporting people to write a proposal, no matter what it's about, making sure they've included all the right things and making sure that they've thought it through properly and they've got all the elements that they need to have. And to an extent, it's nice if that is like a personal relationship, but it can actually be done by producing resources and supporting people, so you don't need to have that synchronous thing where somebody has to sit down and meet with somebody. You can create resources to help make the process more accessible to a proposer.
Much agree. Rafa, please go for it. You're muted too. You're muted, Rafa.
Just getting back a bit to the previous topic of CA, PA. What's the motivation for CA and PA on Catalyst? Is it financial or
money mainly? I think that's gone now.
I'm not sure actually only of the money, to be honest.
No, you're right. I'm kidding, but
I think from the beginning, it was really people who really take care of having somehow a certain control barrier in between proposals and the treasury, who want to say, hey, there shouldn't be any dumb questions and whatnot. So the first CAs and VCAs, which we saw coming, they have been mostly very committed. Or we say, hey, we take responsibility of the treasury and we want to make sure that there's no shit coming up. There were a lot of initiatives, and since the beginning, the CAs and VCAs have been the strongest group in Catalyst, actually, when it comes about initiatives, engagement, quantity and quality of outcomes. But then over time, as the funds raised, I think the mindsets of the CA and VCA program changed a lot as well. There's been a lot of cheating. There have been some not nice stuff and whatnot. And then it shifted towards to Vanessa, what you said. I think I'm very agreed and really moved just to, yeah, making some bugs.
Okay, thanks.
But most of the, I think also what was quite remarkable, CAs and VCAs, at some point it was extremely successful onboarding people to Catalyst through this role. Because it's not a role which asks you a high commitment. You can assess as many proposals as you want. And you can go for as much or as less as you want, actually. And it helped a lot of people directly getting engaged at the ecosystem. Though one negative outcome was that as it was so easy to sign up, there wasn't any process really. You just had to provide your email address, sign up on IdeaScale, and shows you have been a CA, which led to the problem that we had the most of the CAs have fucking no idea on technical proposals. There are no developer, have no idea. And then highly technical written proposals, which have been sometimes extremely valuable for the ecosystem, got a very bad ranking, but mostly just because community doesn't have the capacity to properly assess these proposals. So this was a flip side of this as well.
And how this was overcome, if it was. It wasn't.
No.
Okay.
There have been some ideas. For example, in Cardano, you have the CIP ecosystem as well. It's a really small group, but CIPs are Cardano improvement proposals. A little bit the same, yeah, not at all the same like Catalyst, but literally where you can submit proposals to submit changes, usually as Cardano improvement proposals, which would improve the Cardano protocol in one or another way. They are usually not incentivized, so there are never rewards linked to it. And this is managed by IoT at this point. And there's a group of very strong, actually, editors and authors. And because usually to submit, to, let's say, review a proposal on Catalyst or Sway or Deep Funding, it would take you maybe maximum when it's a really strong proposal, let's say 2-3 hours or something like this, when you really take your time, go through all the links, through everything what is provided there. Though auditing a CIP can take months because you have to go so deep into tech that, yeah, just have fun down there, right? And one idea was to say, hey, if you have two different ecosystems like this, maybe being able to onboard CIP editors into the Catalyst process to provide some sort of extremely strong technical group, which is able to review and evaluate very strongly technical type projects proposals, but didn't take place yet because Catalyst is on pause since a half a year. So yeah, not on pause, but yeah, on pause. Yeah, and Vanessa said it as well. It wasn't just tech proposals. Lots of PAs had no clue about education proposals and community engagement proposals. That's true too. I think one major lesson there, I think, is really you can't just expect to get a reviewer or evaluator in place for this funding round and you expect him to generate high feedback or insights on the proposal. If you want to have people in place, they have to be educated, right? Like PAs, Vs, and CAs. This was the main intent of the Catalyst School, actually, what have been started in the very early days of Catalyst, to build this educational framework for the community to say, hey, you want to become a CA, we help you towards, we teach you how it works, the first principles, though still you have to expect from them to build a lot of knowledge in the new domain here, right? Very often these are people who engage the first time in blockchain, so there's a lot to catch up on already. And here this education of value-added roles shouldn't be estimated. This is really key if you want to go for a long-term success, I think. Vanessa?
Yeah, I was just asking Curtis in the chat, like, did he feel that the role changed from CA to PA? And I've just been thinking about it, and I kind of realized that it did, because it feels like initially it was very much a kind of like all comers, anyone can come in and an opinion is valid, and it's almost like crowdsourced wisdom. And then as we got towards PAs, it seemed to be that we were thinking more about expertise, or trying to, and then getting frustrated because there wasn't expertise. For me, the problem was that I think PAs just got a little bit above themselves almost. That sounds rude, but it's the only way I can think of it, of expressing it, that they kind of felt like they were the experts. And the point is, the proposers are always the experts. They know the fact that they've come and proposed it, they know what they're talking about. And I think maybe scaling back what a PA is supposed to talk about when they assess a proposal, and maybe not expecting them to give these like huge screeds of 3,000 word essays or whatever. I don't think they should be expected to have necessarily that much expertise, but they can have opinions because they know the ecosystem. And I think maybe they shouldn't be, yeah, if they know something about the topic of the proposal, then yeah, sure, say it. But if they actually don't, they shouldn't be commenting. I mean, what I was saying in the chat earlier about how a lot of PAs don't know much about community engagement, yet they still have plenty to say. Do you know what I mean? And you'd be reading their reviews and just going, sorry, this is nonsense. You've got no idea what you're talking about. So, you know, maybe be wise and don't say to, and if you can set up the system so that the PA doesn't feel they've got to opine on something that they don't know about, then that's good.
They're really good thoughts. Also, while listening to you, I think this was really something what established step by step over time, because on the very beginning, like PAs and proposers, we still had sessions, right? Where we had proposals together with PAs ideating on proposal ideations and first drafts and whatnot. And over time, it really came, like you said, right? The CAs and VCAs became like a superior imposed bodies to the community, to the proposers. And I think a lot of CAs knew this because there was a lot of cheating. Everyone could observe like systematically down evaluating certain proposals and whatnot. When you have just a group of 3-4 CAs who line up together to down evaluate specific people, you have a massive negative amount. And I think this culture, which established over the time, was really dangerous and led a lot to internal frictions, I think, as well in Qatar, especially on the scale. And then, yeah, like some funny cases, like Dimitri case. Something here might smart.
Not to divert the conversation, but it just occurs to me that one of the things that we worried about a lot with PA reviews is, oh, was this written by an AI? And I kind of think in the context of SingularityNET, that's an interesting one, because for me, if it was, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. If it's a good review and if people have used AI intelligently, fair play. So I just wonder like how we could even make use of AI tools.
I love that. Thank you, Vanessa, because there is the two parties, I feel like right now, those that are anti-AI because it's taking over the jobs, and then those are saying, well, hey, it's going to help me do my job. You know, it's just a tool. So I agree with that perspective. And just to kind of go back about the CAs and the PAs, that the problem you mentioned, Vanessa, of people speaking out of their capacities and their experiences and then trying to posture themselves as the authority figure, that seemed to have become such a major problem that there was at least 3 or 4 meetings I was a part of where they frowned on that. They tried to instruct the PAs, look, you're not an authority figure here, and don't speak out of your experiences, and only talk to what you're familiar with and what you know. That did seem to become a major problem. I also observed what you discussed about when it became PAs. I think by granting them a certain level of authority, they just took that straight to their head, and they just said, well, okay, I'm above everybody else. I observed that as well. When you asked about CAs transitioning to PAs, this could just be me and the way I interpreted it, but the CAs kind of, I defined that as we discussed previously, the facilitators. They're here to help the proposers, help the voters, just help the process itself. If there's missing gaps or there's gaps in there, the CAs were to help assist with that. Then the PAs came out, and it felt a bit more like your role was to scrutinize instead of assist. Let's provide criticism, right? Not necessarily criticism, but critique, the proposal itself. And that sort of turned into that authority mindset. Sorry, those are my 2 cents.
This really good stuff, because actually, I remember also in Catalyst, there has been very often also this conversation about, should we actually have static roles who forcefully build up some sort of bureaucracy? You always will have some sort of clique building and teaming up and whatnot. And maybe looking, because right now there aren't, let's say, that much, let's say, focus groups in deep funding as in Catalyst. And this is maybe a good thing. And could we maybe also learn here really from the experiences from Catalyst, where you say, hey, we had 2.5 years of experimentation. We had 7, 8 different roles coming up, which have been rewarded. And we saw to what it led, actually. And maybe also saying then, maybe roles don't have to be static, and we don't want to build this imposing bodies. I mean, reviews could be actually done really well, maybe with AI tools, right? For example, whatnot.
These permanent roles were discussed in our last special town hall on the supervisory council, because one of the proposals were stating about having 5 members of the council, but being 3 permanent to have this sort of institutional memory, right? And then you have 2 that would be rotating. And one of my concerns it's exactly this. These 3 persons that will be there for how long in order to bring this memory. They might become like kings and queens and so on and bring a lot of hurdles to the process itself, in my opinion.
Maybe you're right. And that's the funny thing, right? A lot of the stuff we first have to test it and experiment it, right? I think a lot of value, what I think from our case, really a smart thing, what we could do together is really figuring out, for example, cases like this, when roles emerged, what happened? What have been the metrics that this happened? And what can we learn from it? Because then we have already some learnings from which we can start, and we don't have to start at 0, for example. That also looking then beyond governance and roles, coming back to the point in general, again, comparing deep funding to Catalyst. First one was the platform, where you compared IdeaScale to Sway. Then on governance, for example, the voter privacy. When it comes to contracts, for example, no contract in Catalyst, contracts in deep funding, where we have both 2 times plutocratic dominated system, then to the roles. What else would be interesting to compare besides platform and governance?
I mean, I don't know how you'd measure it or how we'd start to talk about it, but very often people say, the feel of the community in SingularityNET, it just feels different. And then we sort of go, in what way? I don't know really. So maybe that's something to talk about.
The feel, so culture, maybe? Culture, atmosphere.
Yeah, I guess so. And, I think some of it is to do with the size of the community, like I said before, but it's not everything, is it? Maybe it's to do with who's here. Maybe it's to do with the fact that it's about a different issue. It's about kind of AI rather than purely blockchain. I don't know. I'd really love to know if other people find that it is different.
What are your thoughts? Let's say, because you know both since a while now. How would you describe actually the main differences between SingularityNet community at large and Cardano community at large? While there's a lot of overlap already, but anyway.
I think you're asking the wrong person, because I've had this conversation with a few people who go, "Oh, I think it's really." I actually don't find it that different. And I think that's just because I was around Catalyst for quite a long time. And in the end, you build your networks and you gravitate towards people that make sense to you. And I guess SingularityNet is comparatively small, so maybe there's not that, I don't know, there's not that many of the kind of people that I would just go, "Oh, I don't really know how to even approach making sense of them," I think Catalyst is so big that there are a lot of people that if I went into their Zoom sessions or their Twitter spaces or whatever, I'd kind of go, "Yeah, I don't really gel with this." But, the people I'd spend time with in Catalyst are the people that that makes sense to me. And it seems like most of the people in SingularityNet are that as well, but it's quite a bit smaller. So yeah, in experiential terms, it's not that different for me, but I have heard a lot of people say they think it is. Maybe it depends who you hang out with in Catalyst. I don't know.
I believe it's something that we have to first, before trying to change this, it's something that we have to define if it's good or bad, right? In the sense of good and bad thing, because I don't believe we are going to get in the same feeling for the both. It's kind of I don't see that happening. So if it's a bad thing to be different, we may be trying to converge. But if it's a good thing, which I believe it is, we should have more of it and try to understand what's the differences and bring and go for it. I'm not a father, right? But I have the impression that, but I have a sibling. So it's that situations of parents, they always say, "Oh, we love both equally." And indeed, they probably do, but in different ways, because it's not the same two siblings that are there. So you have this perception, this feeling for each of one, but not necessarily one is worse than the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to clarify, I wasn't trying to say that they shouldn't be different. I was just saying in a lot of ways, I haven't found them that different. But yeah.
Are you able, Vanessa, to express what you like most in this culture of the SingularityNet community?
No, I don't think I could actually. That's a really hard question.
Okay.
I think when looking on Catalyst and Deep Fund in this regard, I think one thing what strikes for me a lot is the possibility of engagement. Are people able to engage? And what is promised to them as well in engagements? For example, I think one really good lesson in Catalyst was since the beginning, as what said, it's an experiment and but it's all about community. Though over time, we saw a lot that most of the decisions were community invited in, they're already made. Like on essential, let's say, for example, Catalyst structure. How is it administrated? How does it work? How are the roles exactly defined and all that? Was usually really decided top down by announcements from IoT. And I think over time, this is true of a lot of people because they really came with the motivation and the vision as well to shape this together with the community and the ecosystem, together with the founding entities, but not for them, right? And I think this has been a little bit reactional over this years that a lot of people, they volunteered over years even by establishing the set, but always, yeah, not really like, let's say, recognized really for the engagements, I would say. And that's true of a lot of people. And I think deep funding, I think it takes a very different approach. It grows much slower already than Catalyst. I mean, Catalyst, I can remember like beginning 2021 when we had 3 funding cycles at the fucking same time. First funding cycle was fund distribution, second one voting was open, the third one submission was open. Like fucking no, fund 3, no, 4, 5, and 6 to play at the overlap day, and it leveled up on the funding rounds insanely fast. Actually, also by doubling the funding amounts, where it went from 250,000 in the first funding round to 25 million in the 9th funding round, just massive. Yeah, I think deep funding takes a much slower approach there. And I think it's taking community input much more considered as, yeah, that's something valid. And it's not community working for SingularityNET Foundation to develop Deep Fund. There might also be a major difference that IoT, it's a for-profit company. And SingularityNET Foundation, well, it's a foundation. So there might be also massive difference actually in the interest of the founding entity already. While IoT, for example, developed Catalyst really as a product, though SingularityNET Foundation maybe does not have the goal to build this as a marketable and, let's say, profitable product, which they want to promote to anybody else, right?
Exactly. And even under a regulation, if you are a foundation, you can't have a product or services. Well, services, it's different, but a product, at least under the German legislation, you can't have it. So it's quite different being a foundation or a for-profit, not for-profit and a for-profit organization. So in this sense, yes, it's totally the case.
That's some really, oh, sorry, go for it.
No, I wasn't.
Okay. But that's actually some fundamental, really good actual knowledge about this, right? The decentralization fund shouldn't be built as a product by a for-profit institution. Maybe this might imply some by default shitty outcomes. It's just this.
Yeah, I guess this feeling that we were discussing here, I'm gonna do another parallel with it's like the Catalyst is a corporation, and Deep Funding is a startup, right? So you have these different. When you go to a corporation, you have all the rules, manual books that you have to follow. It's all set up. And when you go and you are hired by a startup, it's completely, well, let's do it. You are part of the process. You are building together and going on and discussing and making part of it. There are a lot of hurdles, of course, in both sides. And then we go to another situation where is probably what we are going to see is about the profile of each person, right? The personality of each person. We have people that prefer a more structured environment to operate, and there are people that prefer a less structured environment to work and operate. So we might be seeing these differences in the near future. Perhaps people migrating 100% from Catalyst to Deep Funding, or having people coming up from outside only for one of the both. And yeah, but it's interesting to think in this perspective.
I think also cause like this just to generally taking a step back and not looking, okay, what are we doing in Deep Fund? What are we doing in Catalyst? But taking that step outside, like, okay, let's compare this both together. I mean, just so far from the session, I think there's really good stuff which came so far together here. So thanks a lot for this already. We are getting quite over time, but I didn't really set a deadline, so I don't care. We just like the call went already. Everybody who has to jumps off.
Yes, I started in the breakout room with Aaron with the consensus. Very nice, definitely a very nice project. And then we jumped here to here.
Now Aaron and consensus is definitely. I remember so one of the people who helped him to onboard on Catalyst back in, this was fund 4 or 5. And then he got 2 times funded there as well to build up some first stuff. Really good guy, definitely. Really committed to the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Then looking again on the possibility to gauge. Actually, one thing I didn't fully understand. You said Catalyst is a corporation, Deep Funding is a startup.
From your inputs, from Catalyst, I got this perception. In the sense of you can contribute much more in the deep funding, in the sense of building it, if I understood correctly. And Catalyst is already kind of settled, not in stone, but I guess Vanessa mentioned it here, something about in Catalyst it always feels like decentralizing is a struggle, right? So moving this direction, we here in Deep Funding, we still have more room to decentralization, which if we are going to make a parallel with corporations and startups, we are much more horizontal than vertical at this point. So decentralization would be the horizontalization and centralization in a vertical process, managerial process.
See, perspective makes sense. Yeah. Because then we'll also grow the pace of growth. Because I think this is really important as well. Because, for example, we are over 1 year now with deep funding, and we just passed the second funding round, right? Catalyst after 1 year passed, more than the double. Actually, now fund 3 then kicked in February. Oh no, it made 6 funding rounds actually after 1 year. So really much faster pace. And I really think taking it slowly is really a better approach. I think if Catalyst would have taken time much slower, I think there would be other outcomes.
That's an amazing feedback. Yes, to understand and have this, it's good, because indeed it's something that we are keeping. It's this. I wouldn't call it a slow pace, right? But more thorough pace to understand, collect feedbacks, participation, and so on. And when we have this, it's a trade-off. The initiatives of, if we talk too much and get too much inputs and etc., we may stall, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, if we just go and do, we might be losing a lot of good insights, inputs, and this sense and feeling of pertains, of being part of from the community. Yeah, please, Vanessa.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but I think that if you do want to kind of do and move quickly on some things, one of the key things is frame it as an experiment. It's a word that gets used a lot in Catalyst. Oh, it's a welcome to the experiment, is what people say, but it's not one quite often. There's no baselines, there's no examination of what has happened as a result of the experiment. There's no community feedback kind of gathered in an organized way. And sometimes there's not even a hypothesis in place about what is it we're trying to find out by doing this or this or this. And I just think, if we're going to try lots of different things and kind of go, you've got to do that, haven't you? You've got to do it to find something out rather than just do it. I don't know.
I think this is maybe, I would say, one of the values which Catalyst have and Deep Fund doesn't have. This possibility anyway, for example, especially with Door on the beginning, Door Garbage, who initially built up Catalyst, to start things out of nothing, just start it. You don't need a lot of brainstorming. You don't need a lot of set rules. Just fucking start it and see where it goes to. Let the people experiment and let them learn why they build it up. Even with accepting that they most likely will fuck up their thing, but still they learned a lot on this, right? I think this mindset, with especially in Catalyst on the beginning also, and with the, I think this and the rapid growth actually led to the outcome that we had in a very short time. A quite strong amount of people coming on an insanely strong commitment in the community. You just could see them almost like all the time around everywhere. Like having, for example, with deep funding, imagine like having Pete and Jan just 50 times as community members all the time around. And at this point, I would think it was more already. Yeah. Their core community was already like 150 to 200 people actually after 1 year. I think this was really massive because then it started to build, then you had these people from a very diverse background all around the globe, which they themselves became community leader and started to build up whole communities where we had the Eastern, Latin, African communities really building up. They're very, very strong actually in Catalyst. And this was beautiful to see actually. In deep funding, as it moves much slower and tends much more to, let's say, careful actions, I would say, in this regard. I think it still has a really strong, let's say, advantage on maybe on the long term, though it's much more difficult to build up this very strong, committed community members in a very quick time. This also what I would see from own experience in deep funding. In Catalyst, it's quite easy to find a bunch of very committed, very skilled people which engage easily in a project which just pops out of, hey, let's do this. Yeah, fucking, sure, let's go for it. And deep fund is very difficult yet, I would say. Almost not really possible. Well, it is. We tried, for example, with deep funding town hall is one of these experiments, but it's a very different experience from what I know from Catalyst, yeah.
And that's funny, or well, because it kind of contradicts what I was saying about corporation and startup. Because when you are in a startup, things goes way more way easier than in a corporation. Corporation, you have a lot of things. Oh, the boss of the boss of the boss has to sign and then goes to another department until you execute, right? In a startup, it's just, okay, I'm going to execute here and then we talk. And from what you are saying, Catalyst has this more loose process when experimenting and executing things than deep funding, right? Okay.
I sort of think maybe this is a function of how much risk you can afford to take. You know, Catalyst is a really small percentage of the overall Cardano treasury. If it went down in a blaze of horrific mess, it wouldn't kill anything. It would upset a lot of people, but do you know what I mean? And it sort of feels like maybe in that position you can afford to go, oh, let's just try it. Let's just see. Whereas I don't know, it feels like you need reflective practice as well. And sometimes in Catalyst, we haven't always done that as well as we could. But from what I can see of SingularityNET, the reflection is happening, but then the actual making the jump of doing it sometimes doesn't. And people can feel a little bit like, oh, I don't know if we thought it through enough. Because it's quite small and fucking up would be really, you know, it would have a big effect.
Yes, indeed, it could kill the program, right? If we step too out of the line, it could be we could have a problem. This also takes me to a question. How do you guys feel that the community itself it's open to wrongs in our execution, for instance? Because one thing is everybody's in the same frequency, right? So yeah, let's experiment, but if things goes down, I don't care. I understood the process. I know we are experiencing, and then I'm going to stick with the community, whatever the result is. Another thing is, okay, this is not for me because they keep mistaking steps and processes. So I don't want to be involved with this organization because they don't know what they are doing, this type of mindset, right? So this is something that would be very harmful if we start to lose community members because we are experimenting and making mistakes all the time with these experiments. So I believe this goes in the direction of being more careful as well. Of course, the financial part is very important, but I guess nowadays our main resource is the community, what we care most of it. So reducing the community because we are doing the wrong decisions, it's something that we don't want to see.
I think one key learning there, and especially also when looking on the financials, because in both regards, right, deep funding as catalysts are fed by actually the treasuries, right, which are managed still from the founding entities. In deep funding regard, it's the SingularityNET Foundation. Means a lot of this, and the tokens for deep funding actually come from the token 2 allocations of SingularityNET Foundation, where I think 30% of the total token minting goes to deep funding, which is in percentage speak quite a significant amount in Cardano, as the treasury is much larger than SingularityNET. I think right now it's 1 billion ADA, something like this, 1.3 or 5 billion ADA, something around like this. I think this what's stronger there, but I think what really changed in Catalyst on the beginning, when the fundings were smaller, the budgets for the proposals have been small as well. And the whole accountability, as there was never really two serious budgets where somebody could be really say, hey, the fuck, what is happening there? It's really changed after, especially in Fund 9, actually, when the stop then happened as well, and IoT decided to make a pause, when there have been really this insanely bad proposals with massive funding amounts being funded. And then you had this problem of accountability. And the community said, hey, wait, that's our treasury. And I think small mistakes from the founding entity, like, hey, shit, we messed up this transaction to the funded proposals. Missed, we fucked up the voting process. We have to restart or something like this. I think this is normal and quite easily accepted by the community because they see, cool, they're doing their stuff. Are they mistaken? They evolve, they develop. Now it works. Great. Shows them directly as well. No, they're confident. They can fix their stuff, right? Anyway, though, when it comes to accountability, which is not forcefully related to the capacity of the, let's say, administrative teeth of an innovation fund, then quickly things really can turn around. Because this moment was a little bit also where we saw the large parts of Cardano communities actually turning against Project Catalyst by this massive lack of accountability. And there was a real friction then. And now people started to really look on proposals and on audits and whatnot. And there was a whole Twitter war going on stop Catalyst, fuck Catalyst, don't waste our funds, don't waste our treasury, right? Sometimes also from very outspoken people and very, let's say, Twitter heroes or whatnot. But it was a very interesting moment, right? To see, wait. And then some real trouble shit happens actually, because over 2 years, Catalyst arrived to establish a very strong core community, which always focused on doing their stuff. Was never a community which was very active on social medias and whatnot. Pretty much really a builders community executing their stuff, right? So most of the projects lacking on marketing, publicity, promoting their stuff, they don't have time for it, they don't know about it, and they don't give a lot of shit about it. I would say they focus on executing their proposals, for example, and processes and whatnot. And these people who have been insanely valuable for Catalyst now turned into a bucket to be presented on Twitter like the devils who waste away large chunks of the treasury, right? And this harmed a lot the community then, because you saw yourself a little bit like, hey, yeah, we're really building cool stuff. You're definitely true. There was amazing work done by community after all in Catalyst. Though was very aggressively attacked then. From amounts of communities, or let's say size of communities, we were not really used to, right? Like Twitter heroes with whatnot, how many thousand followers or whatnot.
Yeah, this is something that I've often felt about Catalyst, is that in some sections of the community, there's a school of thought that a proposer is a scammer unless you can actually prove otherwise. And this is something that I've not seen in SingularityNET, and I'm very pleased not to see it, you know, because yeah, I think it's just the position of proposers has always really interested me. In the work that I do, I'm a participatory artist, and so a lot of the work that I do is funded, you know, is government funded or whatever, or charitable funded. And I think the really interesting and progressive funders are putting the funded people at the center, the proposers, or whatever you call them in the system that you're working in. They put them in the center and they say, well, we're not the experts, you are. What do you need in order to achieve what you're trying to achieve? Rather than going, oh yeah, you're probably just a scammer who's in it for the money. And I understand why people worry about that and stress about that. And I'm not saying that there aren't any scammers, but I think if you try to build a relationship with a proposer and look at where they're coming from and what they want to do with the community they want to work with, and try to understand their perspective and their expertise, then you get a lot further.
That's great.
Yeah, and we try to have we are driven to have these opportunities like governance round where you can propose suggestions on how to improve the processes. It's exactly to deal with situations like this, where we are keen to hear from the community how we can avoid having scammers, for instance, in our process of deep funding. And that's why sometimes we say, okay, it's a community-driven program. So if the community is not giving proposals or registering proposals around this topic, perhaps it's not something that they are worried, right? And then 1, 2, 3 months later, when we have the deep funding round, then you start to see people, yeah, you have accepted this scammers from country X and so on. So that's something that we also understand, that I would say that's kind of a protection for the deep funding program, where we could potentially say, we were open to hear from you suggestions on how to solve that. Unfortunately, nobody made an input around, so it's kind of impossible for us to cover everything, right? But yeah, it's something that we wouldn't like to have. It's some sections of SingularityNET ecosystem downsizing or detraiting the deep funding program would be terrible. Yeah, I can see the struggle in Catalyst in these type of things.
Because I think one really interesting key lesson there could be, for example, when you have the luck already and you have community builders on place who engage to build up processes and whatnot, and you know they are builders, they are not strong in marketing, they are not strong in producing whatnot, promotional material of themselves and whatnot. You say they need their back free to get their stuff done, though they should be well positioned as well in the larger ecosystem, right? Because we saw once an attack came on the Catalyst community by larger, let's say, general Cardano communities, this very strong, let's say, inside Catalyst relations has been proven to be insanely weak when confronted to outside aggressions, right? So say there was definitely already some communication gaps beforehand. Because how is it able that so many people become really concerned sometimes as well and very upset on funded proposals, for example? And very often we saw it well. From my part, I never engaged in discussions there, but very often I saw, for example, in the Twitter discussions, all stuff, the people had fucking no idea about Catalyst. Nobody was really informed what are actually guidelines, and sometimes we saw very populate statements that said, wait, there's a lot of shit inside. That's actually not true. So there was really this problem of keeping the community informed on Catalyst. What becomes a real challenge because over time it became very complex. You had a lot of different roles with a lot of different parameters and ways and communities and processes. And the same will happen to Deep Fund that one way, right? It will become larger. It will gain as well complexity. Now you have a major issue because you have to somehow inform the community on an easy way of the complexity of your innovation fund, which becomes increasingly difficult. And as more the innovation fund grows now, gains on maturity and on complexity, as difficult it is actually to build a constant, let's say, stream of easy communications to larger communities so that they can understand the processes. Because this major information is, I think, really important for later alignment. That you don't have this massive information on very public channels, and then a lot of people are simply not informed and are on the spaces. For sure, they jump on the train there, right? And then you have a problem because now who's facilitating this shit? I think maybe on the beginning already, making sure that Deep Fund is able to communicate once inside Deep Fund. So, hey, proposers come, hey, there's a pool for supervisory council or governance or whatnot. Though always making sure there is a design to make this easy digestible to larger communities.
I guess what's going on in this direction of education and digestible inputs for the community, for the overall public, even outside of the community, to bring them into the community, is well, a small part is Mauro's project, the improvement of social media and etc. Because in his proposal, it's exactly about education, right? So having social media to educate people about what's deep funding, what's our processes, and etc. What's rounds, what's sway and missions and etc. For people to understand and be able to contribute as well, knowing what's going on. But it's a long way to go until we have more digestible information to educate.
I think in the best case, definitely Mauro can open up a really good initiative there. And over time, I think this one person, I think that there should really be actually a network or a collaboration, right? About this actually, for example, to say, hey, ambassadors are building up their marketing guild, right? Where they have the writers work group, video work group, and all the stuff, for example. And to say, to really building this network, because each and any initiative and project will come to a level of capacity where they can't go for more anymore, right? For whatever reasons. And they're making sure they are able to act in a network which is able to just catalyze their own performances as well. But yeah, like I would love to see, for example, just more like, for example, this marketing pool at general, right? Being a constant thing, or to even improve this the pool there and to say, hey, okay, it's not only about, let's say, in this regard, for example, marketing, it's also about education. And say outreach, education, onboarding, all this process, right? Because once you have the outreach, then what? When people reading, then you want them to go where? in which kind of part do you want to onboard them? How do you want to educate them then? It is all of them whole own pipelines somehow.
Yeah.
But
it's in my to-do list to work on this wiki, which I had some experience before, and I guess it's the best way, at least more pragmatic, okay? For people, if you don't have contact, you don't know Felix, you don't know Rafael, Vanessa, Diane, nobody. I want to know what's deep funding, so how I can engage or just know about it. So you have a more driven process that you can educate yourself reading a step-by-step situation. Even deciding or defining, well, I want to go to a developer role, I want to go to ambassador, I want to go to investor or whatever. So my experience with wiki was very good in this sense. It's easier for us to implement and easier for people also to digest the information there.
You triggered me because you said wiki, and I directly jumped to Gitbook and came to other thing because Rafael, this is something you should really look a little bit into. I think I shared this one day or another already. This is actually from Pace, which is a guy who was also since the beginning in Catalyst, and he did a lot of research and analysis actually. So what he did here, the outcome is actually Catalyst funding categories, which came out of an analysis from all funded and not funded challenges, like pools, which have been proposed in Catalyst since Fund 3 and Fund 7, which have been around 100 and something or whatnot. And he came up with this construct to say, okay, like the challenges actually, or the idea categories would be like the pools in deep funding, right? And this one he set up for Catalyst. This might actually start to be implemented in Fund 11 then actually. But for example, on community and outreach, right? I think just looking on it, for example, there's a lot of stuff to learn from the work there, which I think really this is also something when only looking on resources which have been produced in Catalyst, say, hey, this we can easily adopt, adapt, and improve for deep funding. Because it has a little bit everything. And what is important in this regard. And making sure that this knowledge is produced. This is even a funded proposal from Catalyst, right? So we have built this knowledge already. Now it's sitting there. Very often we don't even know that it exists, that it's for free, that it's even funded by the treasury to be used. And we have fucking no way to use it actually very often, right?
Yeah.
I think this, yeah.
Can you share on Discord with me the link to it, please?
Yeah, sure. Put it also in Zoom live chat.
Okay, it's here, right?
Just one important thing to mention, I think, in general, my style would be a little bit when looking on Catalyst stuff to learn, is not to say, oh, they have made it, we take this one by one over. Not at all, right? Much more to say, oh, okay, what was this about? Understanding the context compared to our context and see, okay, what parts from it can we take that definitely makes sense? Though, where are we not agree and say, oh, okay, there we should definitely find our own ways.
Yeah, but definitely a very good benchmark here to analyze and study, and check, make a comparison and bring the best part of it in our perspective. Absolutely.
And Rafael, also there, especially on governance and all, if you want to go really deep, then you should definitely check in with Vanessa, because she's part also with Stephen Wittenstahl from Q8O, which have been Catalyst also since day one, and they actually did a lot in documentation, oversight, audit parts, and there's a lot of knowledge there as well with Q8O, and whole Gitbook universes for you to to find actually really good stuff on blockchain governance. Also, sometimes a more agnostic perspective. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Okay, guys. I guess it's time to to go now. I
Yep.
have to. Vanessa went out, right? Okay.